Hello. In this tutorial I'll be going over how to create hexagonal grid tiles and convert them into Voronoi shape with Blender's geometry nodes. At the end we'll have created something similar to this. We'll create a new geometry node system. Put down a grid node and set the vertex count to 50. If we enable wireframe view, we see that the faces are square-shaped. First we'll convert them into hexagonal shapes. To do this we'll use a little math. Put down a set position node and move the vertices by 0.025 on the x-axis. The aim is to offset by a tiny margin so the vertices don't overlap. This moved the entire grid, so we need to make a selection of what vertices get offset. For this, take the index node and hook it up to a math node set to snap. Set the increment value to 2. Hook this up to a Boolean math node set to equal and hook it up to the selection in the set position node. This selects every other point in our grid and these are the points that get offset. Next we use the triangulate node to convert our quad faces into tris. If I mute the set position node by selecting it and pressing M on my keyboard, you can see the effect of the triangulate node. For our next operation, we'll use the repeat zone so we don't have to duplicate our nodes a bunch of times. Once you hook up the nodes, add the dual mesh node inside our repeat zone. In our repeat zone, I set the iterations to 3. The number of iterations should be an odd number so we can get our hexagonal shapes. An even number gives us the triangulated faces. What we've done so far is give our grid a hexagonal look. Next we work on the Voronoi shape. For this, we'll also use the set position node. Take a noise texture node, hook the color up to vector math node set to multiply. Set the multiply node to 1, 1, 0. This ensures we don't affect the z-axis. Next we hook this up to vector math node set to scale to help us dial the effect's intensity. We then hook the result to the offset on the set position node. Increase the detail value. Set the ruggedness up to 1. Also adjust the linearity value. Next we extrude the individual faces using the extrude mesh node. Set the offset value to a very small margin, I'll use 0.002 on mine. Next we scale down the extruded faces using the scale elements node. Connect the top component to the selection of the scale elements node. Set the scale to 0.9. To get rid of the artifacts, adjust the detail value in the noise texture. This is it for the setup, and all that is left is setting up the shading. First we store an attribute of the faces that are hexagonal and those that are Voronoi shaped. Take the color from our noise texture and hook it up to a store named attribute node. The attribute is to be stored on the faces domain. We'll name this attribute noise. To control where on the grid the effect takes place we have to make a selection. We'll use the UV map from our grid for this. Hook it up to a separate XYZ node. Connect the X component to a compare node set to greater than. For our threshold I use the Y component through a math node set to add. Connect the compare node to a Boolean node set to equal and use this as our selection. I'll connect the compare node to the selection on the store named attribute node. Add a material node. Select the default material and switch to the shader editor. I'll be creating two different materials. For the first material, I set the color to white and adjust the metallic value to 0.945. I'll call this material hexagons. The second material I'll rename to Voronoi. Back in the geometry node setup, I add another set material node and select the second material. In the shader editor I use an attribute node to bring in the attribute we just created. Hook the color up to a color ramp containing your choice of colors and then hook the color ramp to the principal BSDF node. Back in the geometry node setup, connect the compare node to the selection of our second material. For the colors, I use a medium shade of blue and a very light shade of blue. And that is how you create a hexagon to Voronoi effect. You can use the setup to create a stained glass effect by using more colors on your color ramp in the material.